everyone is having a good night, day, whatever time it is where you are. I figured I would just have a kind of relaxing stream that I could export to YouTube and just read some scary stories. I've got several books like this, and this is just one of them. So, let's get started with Weird Hauntings, True Tales of Ghostly Places. Okay. Old Wyoming State Penitentiary. Imagine yourself confined to a room 5 feet by 7 feet with only a bare cot and toilet. Down the hallway, terrified screams and sadistic laughter echo throughout the night, reminding you that you live in what may as well be described as one of Dante's lower circles of hell. You'll be alright, you tell yourself, so long as you keep to your tasks and don't make eye contact with anyone who lives nearby. Now imagine the same room shared with up to 5 other men, a prison cell in which every breath drawn might be the last, and every setting sun heralds new terrors that come in the night. In a new but fearful facility. By 1873, the prison in Laramie, Wyoming was bulging at the seams, home to convicts from the surrounding areas. It could no longer accept new inmates. Yet, let me remember, that's what I'm trying to look for, the word that I'm trying to look for. Remember my place for just a second. It's a little dark. This should be better. I was right here. Yet the stream of new arrivals never let up. The state government decided a new prison was needed, one that could accommodate the high number of miscreants who roamed Idaho at the time. Construction of what would be an enormous structure began in 1888. It took 13 years, but on December 12, 1901, Wyoming State Penitentiary in Rawlins opened up its doors. The incarcerated were assign meaningful duties that would not only put money in the coffers of both the prison and the state, but would also plant in the prisoners the seed of a work ethic. Over the years, the prisoners manufactured brooms, shirts, and processed wool when they weren't stamping out license plates. Despite the state's good intentions, the new facility had tiny cells without running water or toilets, and their bare concrete walls bred more than a sense of punishment. They bred madness. Fights were common, as were stabbings and near riots. In just 3 years, the penitentiary saw several bloody battles between prisoners, one of which involved a prisoner attempting to cut another's heart out. The terrified guards, who sometimes felt themselves the real prisoners, often did nothing. Such violence could only be tolerated for so long, prompting the construction of the Hole in 1906. Being confined to this windowless room was the punishment for anything from refusing to eat dinner to murder. The guilty were chained to a wall in the room and left in total darkness. During their stay, they were attended to only briefly and were fed minuscule amounts of bread and water. It wasn't until 1914, years after the prison had already come dangerously close to its capacity, that the penitentiary cells were equipped with toilets, washbowls, and running water. Cold only, however. After several escape attempts by inmates, high concrete walls replaced the wooden stockades surrounding the prison buildings in 1915. The convicts were pressed into service to erect the walls and guard towers, partially to make them aware that escaping would be impossible. Executions were commonplace, either by hanging or by gas, but it wasn't just the state that meted out capital punishment. Prison guards often enforced their own brand of justice, or simply turned a blind eye to prisoner-devised hangings. In one case, the person hanged didn't die immediately, prompting his executioners to haul him up by the rope and toss him over the rail for a second time. This time the prisoner died, and the guards stayed mum. What does mum mean? I guess quiet? By the late 1970s, tales of abuse and overcrowding reached the state. Stories involving the horrors of the Hole and other tortures, including thumb cuffs and the insidious Oregon boot, a heavily weighted steel shoe, reached the proper ears, prompting an investigation. By 1981, the Wyoming State Penitentiary closed its doors for good, leaving decades of abuse and agony behind. It is impossible to identify the restless souls that never left what's called the old pen. They're simply too numerous. What is clear, however, is that in many places, whatever remains is angry and resentful, and not at all shy about showing its feelings. Tour guides and tourists alike have reported seeing shadowy figures disappearing around the corners and malicious presences throughout the structure. There are, however, a few places deemed hotbeds of activity. The showers, where countless inmates were attacked, violated, or even killed, are the setting of many a story. Some tour guides won't even enter the area anymore. Also on the list of places to be avoided are the former death row and gas chamber. However, most agree that the worst hauntings occur in the black pit called the Hole. Whatever lurks there, according to whose job it is to walk the halls, is angry and crazed, threatening anyone who enters. There are also specific cells in which voices are heard and presences felt, also well known as Guard Tower Number 9, in which a guard committed suicide. The buildings stand as they did, with cell walls still bearing the markings and artwork of those who occupied them. Death row cells were adorned with photos of those prisoners who spent their last moments inside. The old prison cemetery is visible on the grounds, and many of the tombstones lie broken or stand propped against a fence. In other words, the prison looks no less ominous for the lack of new prisoners. Time will tell whether the awful energy generated within the walls is here to stay. Do not go alone. Some 14 miles west of the wine mecca of Paso Robles, on California's central coast, is a historic burial ground that plays host to a tragic but harmless spirit, and so they say, any number of more sinister ones. The graveyard can be found in the community of Adelaida, first settled in the late 19th century. Pioneers flocked to the area for the perfect weather that seemed to make everything grow. A post office was established in Adelaida in 1887, and Mennonite Christians of German origin soon became a presence in the town. It is said that the cemetery's most famous ghost is that of Charlotte M. Sitton, supposedly a Mennonite woman who met with a horrible misfortune when both of her children died in a diphtheria epidemic. Most accounts say that Sitton was so distraught over the loss of her children that she committed suicide. While this makes a good story, there has been no evidence uncovered that lends credence to this tale. Several other accounts have Sitton sinking into a depression from which she never recovered, and taking her own life a few years later by either hanging herself in the schoolhouse or taking poison. Many youngsters' graves in the cemetery give 1887 as the date of death, probably the year the diphtheria epidemic raged through the little town. Sitton, who was 19 when she left the world of the living, died in 1889. Charlotte is supposed to make her appearance every Friday night, anywhere from 10 o'clock to 11:30, either drifting through the tall grass and weeds in a white dress or wandering about the headstones weeping for her children. Because the Adelaida Cemetery sits atop the summit of a commanding hill amid thousands of acres of fog-shrouded vineyards, it is hardly surprising that the lonely hillside has attracted the attention of amateur parapsychologists for years, and they are not often disappointed. On entering the cemetery, the first thing a visitor notes is the thick strands of Spanish moss hanging from the oaks, as if the place were decorated for some sort of year-round Halloween party. Ghost hunters and run-of-the-mill thrill-seekers alike have reported seeing shadowy human-shaped mists and furtive glowing eyes and hearing the sounds of footsteps. Newly bought or fully charged batteries fail, and EMFs, electromagnetic field meters, go wild. Cold spots come and go, and hooded black figures chase the adventurous. Daniel Berry, an investigator who made at least 2 trips to the area, stated that the hooded specter appeared in his bedroom 3 weeks after a visit to Adelaida. Perhaps the last word should be left to Mr. Berry. If you go to this cemetery to investigate these findings, do not go alone. There seems to be an evil presence in the grove of trees at the center of the cemetery. Red eyes are normally connected to a poltergeist, which can be very harmful. The Pinewood Scratcher. Pinewood Cemetery is located in Brunswick, New York, a small town east of Troy that's less than an hour's drive from my hometown of Clifton Park. Its real name is Forest Park Cemetery, but most people who live in the Albany, Troy, Schenectady area call it Pinewoods after a road that runs alongside it. I had heard all the stories about the cemetery long before I visited it, but nothing prepared me for what happened when I went there with a group of friends. It was a Saturday night, and my friends and I were looking for a thrill and thought Pinewoods might be the place to find it. So we drove to the cemetery and parked on the road outside the entrance. We were all a little apprehensive, but that didn't keep us from walking right in. As soon as we entered, we heard strange sounds that could have been voices, but we kept walking, and I held the flashlight as we ventured toward the remains of a large mausoleum in the middle of the cemetery. When we stopped in front of the mausoleum, we heard something moving near the spot where my friend Jay was standing. The flashlight showed it to be a tree, its branches creaking and crackling as if someone were climbing it, but no one was, nor was there any wind that night to rustle the branches. We just stood there, too scared to move on. Finally, Jay said, "Okay, who here has guts?" He began to walk toward the path that leads to some headless statues in a different part of the cemetery, and my younger brother Adam and his friend Troy started to follow him. Just as they struck off, we heard a loud sound from the mausoleum. Jay, Adam, and Troy doubled back to join those of us who'd stayed behind. Even with the flashlight on high beam, we couldn't see what it was, but it sounded like it was coming toward us. Jay came up next to me and said, "Whatever it is, it's right there in those trees." The flashlight must have been casting some light on my face, because Nicole pointed toward me and told my fiancée Candy to look. Candy turned and said, "Oh my God." Then the rest of the group looked at me and started shouting that my face was bleeding. In fact, it did burn a little, and I ran toward the road and our cars. Everyone else followed, still screaming. When I got to my car, I felt like I was about to throw up. Someone shined the flashlight on my face again, and everyone got even more upset. We jumped into our cars and peeled out. As we drove away, I took a quick look at myself in the rearview mirror and was shocked to see 2 bloody gashes on my left cheek. To calm down, we headed to a nearby bar. There we met 2 strangers, Dennis and Phil. They asked about the scratches on my face, but were skeptical when we told them what had happened. They said they were familiar enough with the cemetery to know that the route we'd taken had no low-lying trees or branches that could have gashed me. So, foolishly or not, we all went back to the cemetery to investigate further. The 8 of us walked close together as we entered. I didn't hold the flashlight this time, thinking maybe that was the reason I'd gotten scratched. I also put the hood of my sweatshirt up to protect my face. This doesn't make any sense, but I'll keep reading. We walked closer to the mausoleum than we had before, and began to hear the same strange noises. Dennis, who was holding the flashlight, said he saw eyes up ahead. My brother Adam saw them too, once Dennis pointed them out. Barely 5 minutes had passed when Troy looked at my face and very suddenly said, "Evan, let's go back to the road now." Then when everyone else looked at me, they took off running. Thinking Troy had roped the others into playing a joke on me, I wanted to punch him, but as soon as we got to the road, a girl pulled a small mirror out of her purse, and someone shined the flashlight on my face. What I saw were 5 new scratches, this time on my right cheek. 2 of the scratches were in the shape of an X. I felt like crying as we started back towards the cars. As we drove home to Clifton Park, Troy said that he had been watching my face as best he could for the whole time we'd been there. He saw blood forming on my face, he said, but not anything that could have scratched it. And just like last time, I felt nothing when it happened. But that's not all that happened that night. The whole way back home, the lights outside the car went on and off over and over again. And I said out loud to whatever I hoped was responsible, "I'm sorry we went to the cemetery and bothered you. Can you please leave us alone?" After I spoke, the lights turned on, but we couldn't get them to turn off until miles later. The lights stayed on, but we couldn't get them to turn off until miles later. The scars from the scratches on my face are still visible today. Whenever anyone asks me what happened, I just say I got into a fight. And why not? No one would believe me if I told them the truth. I mean, I don't want to sit here and cast any doubt on these stories while I'm reading in the middle of the video, but that one, the other ones are kind of creepy that I've read so far, but that one, the only problem is, first of all, how is anybody going to know for a fact that there aren't any low-lying trees that could scratch your face? Second, if you were the guy, why would you go back to the cemetery? And third, why would you think that you got scratched because you had a flashlight? That was the part that didn't make any sense to me. Like all 3 of those things. Huh. Well, where's the, Anyway, I just found a piece of paper that fell out of this book. Mysteries of Creek Road. Situated a few scenic miles above the Pacific shoreline, the town of Ojai, I don't know how you say that, is Ojai, maybe? I don't know, is just far enough from the bustle of Los Angeles to make it seem like any other small Ojai Valley town. There are, however, enough Halloween caliber stories here to keep any tour company busy throughout the year, and many of these tales are centered around Creek Road, which runs through Ojai and beyond. It is best known to concern a man who burned to death, a motorcyclist who met a shocking end, and a purported vampire. Possibly the most famous ghost in town is known as Charman, whose skin hangs in cooked strips from his skull, and who reeks of burning flesh. No, this grotesque spirit wasn't the victim of some horrible backyard barbecue accident. So what happened? Accounts seem to differ on whether the man perished in a great brush fire in 1948, a downed plane, or a car crash. Stories about him have been told in the Ojai Valley since at least the 1950s. The apparition has been sighted numerous times, either near or on the Creek Road Bridge, a few miles south of town near Camp Comfort County Park. He is said to startle anyone who dares walk the road at night, and reportedly tore the leather jacket off of one terrified witness in the 1950s. One story, probably one of hundreds told around late-night campfires, says that Charman is the ghost of a man who was hiking back to his car with a can of gasoline one night. Some of the gas spilled on his clothes, and for some reason he made the fateful decision to light up a cigarette, accidentally turning himself into a human torch. Most accounts, however, say that he was a homesteader who was unable to save his family in a brush fire. The Headless Motorcyclist. Another popular tale concerns a ghost on wheels. In the 1950s, a motorcyclist who was trying to pass a truck on the narrow mountain turns of Creek Road was decapitated by a wayward steel beam that became dislodged from the truck bed. The incident happened so suddenly that the motorcycle sped on and passed the startled driver, who promptly had a heart attack and crashed in a ravine. The cyclist ghost still rides at night, looking for his lost head. In local lore, the unlikely biker the unlucky biker, and Charman are joined by a phantom hitchhiker and numerous anthropomorphic mists and shadows. One late-night motorist even claimed to have seen Bigfoot in the area where Creek Road exits Highway 33. A simple nighttime drive on this twisting creek road, lined with gnarled oak trees, is enough to spontaneously generate spooky tales. In light of all this, perhaps it is not so strange that the Ojai Valley is also home to a vampire legend. Sometime in the 1890s, so the story goes, a strange visitor arrived from Europe and promptly bought a ranch near, where else, Creek Road. When cattle and then people started turning up drained of blood, settlers started to wonder about their new neighbor, who didn't seem to come calling in the daylight hours. Armed with crosses, holy water, and a wooden stake, they crept up on the creature, who was lying in a stone sarcophagus under a tree. A huge black dog tried to stop them, but the holy water sent the beast howling away in pain. Opening the heavy stone lid, the posse quickly drove the stake home and sprinkled holy water in for good measure. And the vampire has not troubled the residents of the peaceful Ojai Valley since, it is said. No one seems to know where the casket is, but aficionados of the supernatural keep looking for it. I think that was 4 stories. I better take a break because my throat's getting kind of scratchy. But that was kind of fun, right? I'll go ahead and it's only been 33 minutes. It feels like it's been longer than that I've been sitting here reading. I guess that I could I guess that I don't have to make the videos as long as possible every single time. I do need to give my throat a little bit of a break here from speaking out loud, you know. But that was kind of spooky. Which one was your favorite? I mean, I think that that 4th one was kind of weird, you know, like the idea that so many different strange things had happened in this one place, you know. But anyway, I think that I am going to take a break for a while, and I'm gonna put this one on my YouTube channel, of course, and I'll be back sometime soon. So take care until then, and I will see you soon.